Jack Forrester never thought he would get a mystery fortune from an alien when he retired. King had been a battlefield medic for years, mending warriors back together in the Tyran expansive army. In the midst of conflict zones throughout the galaxy, but those times were long since over. He resided on the calm, dust-covered planet Orin 7, an outpost at the edge of the galactic frontier. His life consisted of repairing outdated aircraft, consuming cheap whiskey, and attempting to win his hologram community came to life. That piece came to an end because he was unable to ignore the ghosts of his past. Late one night, Jack was in his workshop, half sleepy, holding an old engine in one hand and a bottle of whiskey in the other. In the other, when the Thean Dominion's royal insignia showed up on his console, the enormous figure of a tall reptile creature with silver armor and golden eyes that shone like suns appeared as King Zyron. Jack Forrester scowled as he put down the bottle, and he spoke in a deep voice that could order armies into battle. "I'm Zyron, the Emperor of the Tyrannic Dominion, and I'm here to give I don't recall signing." But Jack narrowed his eyes as he bestowed upon you an inheritance that is properly yours. Whether you accept it or not, you have been selected for an intergalactic will, even though the King's golden gaze, shone, is unimportant. The transmission cutoff has already sent your inheritance to your coordinates. Jack sat there in perplexed silence, staring at the now blank screen, for a long time before he could demand an explanation. Screen, and then a thunderous roar shook the sky, rattling the very foundations of Jack hurried outside his homestead, staring up at the sky with a huge dust and debris swirled as the Thean warship swooped into the skies, its engines howling like a caged beast. Whatever was within that ship was going to alter, and Jack's gut twisted Ed. The Titanic cargo ship landed, with a loud thud, ending his life forever. Jack covered his eyes as waves of sand and searing heat rippled across his compound from enormous thrusters. The main cargo doors of the spacecraft hissed open, unleashing a burst of pressurized air as they waited for the dust to settle. A creature Jack had never seen before emerged. It was enormous, almost a tan warhorse's size, with a figure coiled with taut strength beneath silver and black fur that glinted in the light, with a long whip-like tail, razor-sharp claws, and piercing crimson eyes met Jack's, and as soon as it moved forward, a shiver went down his spine since he has faced war animals. Previously, war-ready creatures were genetically modified to obey commands without question, and this, he grabbed the revolver he carried at his hip in case it possessed the same ravenous energy. The creature then said, "You are Jack Forrester, Jack," and froze, almost causing his brain to short-circuit. He blinked once in mid-motion, his fingers just brushing the handle of his revolver. I inquired, "Are you Jack?" As the creature tilted its head slightly twice, its crimson eyes shining with intelligence. "It's a straightforward question, Forrester. Jack looked at you as you spoke, and the monster snorted. Evidently, Jack stepped back and ran a palm across his face to see if he had slipped into some strange inner delusion brought on by liquor. The alien wolf sighed, "Nearly frustrating you. Humans always act as though you are the only one in the galaxy with the ability to speak." How conceited Jack was to let out a dry, "You're right to chuckle, since this is just a typical conversation about space wolves appearing out of the sky on a Tuesday night." Jack's ear twitched unimpressedly. "I'm not a wolf, I'm a Narian. Since I am the Emperor of Mars, the Narian, since, based on what I could see," he moved forward, examining. "You don't seem impressed," Jack said, letting out a short exhale. "Listen, buddy. I've witnessed many bizarre things in my life, including being shot, watching a whole planet burn from space while mercenaries repaired genetically enhanced super troops, yet, that's a new talking alien wolf," and the Narian huffed, as though he had just discovered Jack. The wolf said, "I was cast away, given to you like a discarded object," which was extremely infuriating. Punishment Jack's laughter waned a little because he could sense wrath and bitterness behind the wolf's remarks. Jack asked, crossing his suffering since he had heard that tone far too often. The Narian paused for a little while, "But only because I am different and do not follow orders like the others, in my opinion. Dread what they cannot control, Jack, just as I do." The wolf tipped his head, and you let out a low whistle. That sounds about right. Jack laughed nonchalantly while massaging his temples, asking why they sent me to you because you are not a king, emperor, or warlord. Before all of this began, the Narian remained silent for a while, and I know that I had planned to drink myself to sleep. At last he added, "My name is Cairo, Jack." Jack sighed and squinted. "Cairo, huh?" He nodded slowly. "Cairo, I guess we're stuck together now." I'm rubbing his face. For the first time, the tension between them eased a little as the wolf's crimson eyes examined him. "Seems so human." Jack grinned. "Okay, then let me try to locate something. You eat meat in the kitchen instead of dry ration packets," and Cairo's ears perked up a little at the slightest hint of his expression shows interest, but only if it's not awful. Jack snorted. "You're going to be truly dissatisfied." Cairo silently followed him as he went toward his homestead. His enormous. Jack felt a sinking sensation as they entered, their paws hardly making a sound against the soil. Commencement of something much larger than he ever could have envisioned. Jack disliked surprises, and receiving a huge, as terrible as shocks might go, talking about extraterrestrial wolves had been less than a Cairo had been in his life for a full day, and Jack could already sense that this would be difficult. Cairo was not at all impressed by a dog, nor was he impressed by a pet. Human hospitality. Despite being a genetically modified war-torn apex predator, he carried oneself with a keen, analytical intelligence, as though he were continuously assessing his. Jack could always feel those crimson eyes watching him and evaluating everything he did. Worked with many injured soldiers, war-torn warriors, and broken veterans. But this was the first time his patient Jack, whose teeth were the size of his forearm, pulled himself out after waking, up to the sound of something shattering and moaning. Out of bed and staggered into the main living area, still slept off, the realization that Cairo had pulled open one of the kitchen cupboards, shredding the metal door, and he almost caused him a heart attack. Jack stared as he removed it from its hinges and examined a container of preserved beef, with a hint of contempt. Jack massaged his face while Cairo turned his head and held up the canister, questioning. "This smells synthetic." "That's because the government issued high-protein ration beef lasts for years." Cairo smelled it once more, then bit through the metal without hesitation. Jack flinched at the sound of Cairo chewed attentively and swallowed the crunching aluminum before staring Jack in the eye. "This is disgusting, Jack." Sighed. "Well, welcome to life outside of a royal palace. You'll have to go hunting if you want better food." "Do you hunt, Jack?" Cairo cocked his head, leaning against the counter he used to back in. The Cairo smiled, demonstrating that service survival training hasn't been necessary in years. Enough razor-sharp teeth to frighten Jack. Then maybe it's time to recall that. Jack moaned. "I had a dreadful." After an hour of contemplation, Jack found himself pursuing through the stony canyons of Orin with a gun in hand. CYO walked like a ghost, his paws silent, as he followed the enormous shadow of the alien wolf that was stalking ahead of him. Jack had never seen anything move, and his body blended in with the black cliffs almost too well against the sand. Effectively, Cairo became the terrain Jack nearly felt sorry for, not just a hunter. For the unfortunate animal they were going to capture, they discovered a six-legged desert deer with a sleek hide. Before he could fire, Jack carefully aimed his finger over the trigger while Cairo moved under. The twin sons. He stood next to Jack one moment, and then airborne Cairo sprung from the ridge, twisted in midair, and fell straight onto the stag's back, impacting the animal with a crunching sound. Jack quickly dropped his weapon, and before it could struggle any further, Cairo's fangs slid into its throat, killing it. Cairo lapped blood from his fangs while grinning at you, demonstrating that most people let their hunting partners have a shot first. Jack complained, shaking his head. "You're too slow. You'll have a lot of fun with Could. Say the same, human, but aren't you?" Cairo flicking your tail softly. Jack had a pressing question by the time they returned to the farm. "All right," he murmured, throwing his rifle into Cairo, who had stretched across the workbench. "What precisely is the plan?" Floor, as if he owned it, twitched an ear, and Jack made A hazy gesture that you were. Since I don't recall signing up for a roommate who consumes 200 pounds of me today, is this something that will just last, temporarily? Cairo grinned and said, You can try to send me away. Jack let out a deep sigh. I don't understand. You're clearly not some mindless beast you believe you talk to. Pulling a chair closer and seating down, Cairo hesitated, then said in a low voice, Fight like hell, why the hell did they just dump you on me for the first time? Jack leaned forward and asked, Why is Cairo's crimson? Because they were afraid of me. Jack drummed his fingers, and his eyes flared with something dark and ancient. Because I would not be their weapon. Even as he was bleeding, you believed that you had won. And Jack and Cairo both tensed that ship up there and laughed. Jack's gut drops as he tilts his head toward the sky, which has a beacon on it. That's correct, Vor rasped. The Imperium already knows you defeated me. You may have an hour before they drop. A Cairo growled, and Jack muttered a lengthy, inventive series of insults, saying, The whole damn fleet on this rock. Should Jack wiped his brow and said, Yeah, but where have we gone? Cairo's eyes narrowed. So we stopped running, Jack. Cairo's fangs flashed in the sunlight as you glanced at him. And I believe you're saying that we take the fight. To Jack's side. Well, I guess I always wanted to go out with a bang. At precisely 47 minutes after the second Zenui dropship appeared, Jack and Kiro were in preparation. They had taken control of V's ship, stripped it of any technology that might be beneficial, and made the homestead a death trap by reprogramming the protection shields and turning on the outdated automatic turrets. He set up explosives along the canyon. If the Zenari arrived, they would have to pay for it. Cairo stood at the cliff's edge, his fur brimming with excitement as he gazed up at the approaching vessel. Are you ready? Cairo's crimson eyes gleamed in the twilight as Jack requested him to examine his rifle. I was born prepared for the Zentaur. Jack anticipated soldiers and another mercenary as the ship landed with a loud crash and its ramp hissed. Open. Team. But just one figure appeared and Jack felt his blood freeze at the thought of Cairo. Jack swallowed. No, it's not a bounty hunter, he said in an unnaturally calm voice. Jack had only seen him once during the War of the Expansion, when the Zent warlord was not High Commander Zyros. Renowned throughout the galaxy, a legend encased in horror tales, his cloak was laced with scarlet, his face concealed by a ragged mask of extraterrestrial steel, and his voice was like a dagger cutting through. Jack saw that the muscles of Kale Cairo's sore Kale Cairo stiffened at the entire name. Didn't know Cairo's full name till Zyros stepped forward slowly. His black cape following him were instructed to be removed, but you persisted. Cairo flashed his teeth, and I do more than. Jack mumbled, Oh, here we go, as Zyros continued to exhale, leaving him with no other option. Zyros activated Jack's jaw by signaling hundreds of drones with a flip of his palm. Cairo sneered tighter. Oh, that's just cheap. I'll deal with them, Jack. Looked at him. Are you certain that Cairo's eyes were burning with something wild and ancient that I was created for? The wolf whispered, War, and allowed them in. With a thunderous roar, CYO leaped from the Jack lifted, his gun and cliffed into the swarm of drones below, his claws flashing his body in a tornado of destruction, targeted Zyros and fired. The actual conflict had only barely started when the initial burst of drone fire tore through the. With a growl of rage, Jack ducked behind the makeshift barrier he had built out of the wreckage of VC's ship in Cairo. Among the drones, primal ferocity jumped, his claws tearing through their metal bodies as though they were composed of Jack's weapon, sent forth pulse after pulse, each shot deliberate and accurate, eliminating drones that, in spite of their precautions, veered too near to their position. The sheer volume of High Commander Zyros' assault drones were so numerous that they were blotting out the twin sons of Jack said over the D, or 7 with their dark hovering masses Cairo fall back. Of detonating machinery and dawning propellers. But Cairo was a tornado of devastation that went from one drone to the. His black fur was strewn with sparks as he proceeded to shred them apart with his teeth and claw, and splashes of oil, his eyes blazing with war fire like hot coals, Jack. He pointed his weapon at a fuel cell behind them, knowing they couldn't continue this attack indefinitely. A group of drones, and the blast was so powerful that it sent shockwaves. Cairo was pushed off his feet by the shockwave that tore through the drone swarm and ripped through the air, but the Wolf High Commander Zyros saw him swiftly slide back into a crouch, prepared to resume the battle from his command position. The confusion, his face obscured by his mask, unreadable, and icy with a feint using a hand gesture. He sent another wave, and this time ground forces carrying powerful disruptors started to move in Jack's direction, and Cairo's location. Darn it, Jack grumbled as he checked his ammunition. It appears that we haven't finished yet since Cairo's fur is singed, and he joined Jack behind the barricade, his breath heaving. They sent me away because they thought I might snarl. Jack said, "Let's not let them down by leading their creations against them." Grimm's voice described how the ground forces were marching methodically in a close formation. The troops advanced, shielding as their disruptors charged and aimed at Jack and Cairo, unleashing a torrent of fire. Jack eyed the landscape and stated, "We need to disrupt their formation because they absorbed the impacts with frustrating efficiency." Cairo nodded, comprehending the strategy. "I'll see that ridge up there. If we can cause a landslide, we might break their line." Jack firmly placed a hand on the wolf's shoulder and stated, "Handle it, no. We do this." They moved as a team, Cairo darting, "And I'll set the charges once you all run interference." Jack moved at a pace commensurate with his age as he moved forward to confront the troops head-on and draw their fire. Due to their inability to concentrate on both dangers, the ground forces' explosive charges at the ridge's base caused them to stumble, and Jack quickly gestured for Cairo to advance, and he exploded the devices on the ridge, moaned menacingly, and then fell, shattering the soldiers as loads of rock and earth fell into the field. Formation, burying a few beneath rubble and panting heavily, Jack returned to Cairo, who Jack gasped as he was sending off the remaining confused soldiers, which should give them something to ponder. This is not the end, Cairo thought as he gazed out over the battlefield, his sides heaving. Jack gave him a somber pat on the back and remarked, "No, it's not, but we're still standing, and we will continue to battle until the dust settles." From Cairo and Jack were ready for the following round of attacks, since they knew Zyro wouldn't back down so quickly. As the Sons can attest, the commander had too much invested in this. Started to descend below the horizon, creating long shadows on the battlefield, and a huge warch appeared as a new menace. Zyros himself piloted it as it descended from the flagship, its hefty feet making the ground quiver with every step. Eyeing the oncoming mech, New Jack snarled deep in his throat, wanting to put an end to this personally. The mech was a dangerous foe because it was equipped with a variety of weapons, including missile launchers and plasma cannons. Jack, and in order to evade the mech's destructive strikes, Kiro had to tactically move and use every available piece of cover. Jack stated that our best option, Cairo, is to duck as a plasma blast charred the ground close to them. Nodded, and they divided up against it by utilizing the mech's size and slow-turning radius. Cairo jumped onto the mech's back and tore at the sensors as Jack darted in close fire at the junction point. Sios within the mech retaliated by using armor plate to access its internal systems, utilizing the mech's arm to try to swat Jack away and mercilessly trying to use sharp maneuvers to remove Cairo. But Cairo's brave attempt was the culmination of the pair's unwavering will to preserve their house and each other. Jack took the shot and ripped out an access panel close to the mech's center, revealing its main power cells, discovering its mark and starting a series of events that resulted in the mech shutting down when the mech's frozen Zyros appeared with his pride hurt and his armor dented. He faced them on the ground with a reluctant respect that said, "You have fought." Well, Zyros was arrogant and his words reverberated through the speakers on his helmet. "Maybe you have honor." Beast Cairo stood. "I am Cairo, and this is my home." "I am not your beast," he said, his chest quivering. Zyros slowly nodded. "This battle is yours, but keep in mind that the war is far from." Knowing that this was only a respite we had gained today, Jack and Cairo watched Zyros withdraw to his ship. Grasping Cairo's shoulder, Cairo gazed at the setting sun with contemplative eyes and said, Today we fought as equals, Jack nodded, sensing the weight, and we faced whatever came next together. Despite their triumph and the ambiguity of their shared destiny, he concurred, "Come on." As they returned to their base in silence, Leighton went to assess the damage before. We decided our next course of action. The relationship they had formed in battle was unspoken but as strong as the earth beneath their feet, and it felt comfortable between them.